Welcome to Our Voices, Our Stories, a video archive of the diverse and wonderful community of gay men living in Western North Carolina. I'd like to welcome our guest tonight, Keith Robinette. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. I've known Keith now for 10 years, and we've worked on several philanthropic adventures together. And I think he has a rich and powerful story, and I hope that you all will listen and take away some interesting facts from it and maybe share what your thoughts are on it. So, with that,
Okay.
Keith, let's just kick it off with where'd you grow up and what was it like growing up and realizing you had these feelings for
Uh,
men?
well, I am from East Tennessee. So I grew up my whole entire life in a little small town called Rogersville, Tennessee. Most people don't know where that's at, but it kind of sits in between Johnson City and Knoxville is the best way that I talk about it. And, it's a very small country back hometown. And I grew up in the church. My dad was a deacon. And so we were at church every time the doors were open. So I kind of grew up in an environment of Southern Baptists and kind of that whole kind of genre, I guess you could say. So it was very different kind of growing up, but it was very wholesome. I mean, our town was wonderful. I loved it. It was very quiet, and we could get out on bicycles and ride around town. There wasn't any of this stuff, and we had a neighborhood that I grew up in where all of our friends would get together, and we would always play sports, which I'm not a sports person, but we'd play all sorts of football and basketball, and we played.
Bygone days.
Yeah, way back. I'm not much of an athletic person, but we had fun. We grew up with each other, and so I had that kind of very very wholesome kind of Andy Griffith kind of guy vibe growing up. But even through all of that, I always knew I was different. I didn't really know what it was. I just knew I was different. I never felt like I fit in with everybody else. And you mentioned when did I even think about boys?
Right.
And I remember really, really, really young and noticing that all of the boys in the neighborhoods always talked about the girls in the neighborhood. And that never interested me. And
Okay.
I noticed that I was very attracted to the next door neighbor. And I was like 5 or 6. I was really young. And I even
The boy next door.
The boy next door. And, I even wanted to write a note and put it in the mailbox and all of that kind of stuff. And, do you want to be my friend and all that? And so I kind of knew really on that I was different, but I just didn't really know what it was. And I struggled a lot with that. And, some of that was really hard for me growing up. And, I remember very, very early, even being 8 or 9 years old, and just praying to God, just like, I don't understand what's happening. I feel horrible a lot of days. Just go ahead and take me. I just don't, I didn't ever really feel like I just fit or mattered. And so I would always just pray for God just to take me, give me cancer, give me something, just get me out of this, because I'm in misery.
That resonates, I think, with so many of us in the LGBTQ community. We didn't understand what we were going through, and we didn't have the resources to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
So we just wanted to be done.
Yeah.
And that still goes on, unfortunately. So I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. Go ahead.
You're welcome. And because that was a struggle. I mean, it really was a kind of a struggle, and I carried it with me every day. And, I found some relief in some of it because I love to play the piano. So I found that musical side of myself. And, when I look back now, I'm like, how in the world did nobody not know? Right? I was put a sweatshirt on my head and used it as hair, and I was swinging around and I was dancing to Olivia Newton-John and all of that stuff. So I was very surprised that nobody didn't really know, but they probably did, but never really wanted to say. And the one real event that kind of stuck with me growing up is I still remember it to this day. And so where I grew up, we only really had 2 schools. And so we had an elementary school, and then we had the high school. So the 8th grade was a part of high school at that time. And so I got to go to high school. And so I was super excited. And my mom, who made all of our clothes, and we had the simplicity pattern that she had made me this cute little dark brown polyester vest and bell-bottom pants, and I had on brown Sebagos. I can remember it to this day, and a wide collared shirt. And I remember running down the hall. I think it was at the beginning of school year, and I was running down the hall and just excited. And it's the first time I heard someone yell at me and said, "Run, faggot, run."
Oh, wow.
And I stopped for just a second, and because I didn't really understand what that meant, and I kind of turned around, and he flipped me the bird. And so from that moment on, I kind of really shut down and became very introverted, and didn't really want to express a lot. And it was like that trigger for me, and to hear that word, and I carried that with me all through high school. And never really fit in high school. I had my group of friends, but I never really had that sense of camaraderie, really.
Right.
And really felt out of place.
It's hard. You got this group of friends and you trust them, you know them, but you can't come out because you don't really understand yourself, what's happening to you.
Yeah. And you go to church every day, and they talk about, not every day, but every Sunday, and they're always, all the preachers were fire and brimstone, and, and homosexuality seemed to, for some reason, come into a lot of the sermons on a regular basis, and, how you're going to hell and all of that. And so it really resonated and stuck with me. And I'm like, I'm really almost a horrible person, because why am I having these thoughts, and what am I doing? And everyone's against me. And so I dated girls or tried to date girls. I wasn't very successful at it, but I did. So I tried to date girls and try to fit that in. But I going to school was just not fun. And, even now going back, I've been to a couple of reunions, and people really can't understand why I didn't have a good time in high school. And I'm like, well, you didn't have somebody bullying you every single day. You didn't have somebody flipping you off. You didn't have somebody under their breath calling you queer. And I said, you didn't have to face that.
True.
So I really sheltered myself.
So what was it like after you started moving out of high school and then going off to college and everything? And
when I finally when I got out of high school and started to go I went to Walter State Community College, and I did that for a couple of years, and I started to change a little bit, I think, just having a little bit of the freedom. And so I really wanted to go to UT. That was my school. My brother went to UT, and I was like, I wasn't a Vol fan or anything. I just wanted to go to UT. Right. And so my mom and dad told me that they would pay for my college education if I would go to Carson Newman College. And that was a religious college in Jefferson City. And so I said, okay. And so I wound up going there. And so when I was there, I think I started to have a lot more of these feelings, because I was starting to a little bit more understand what was going on. It was the first real time that I had noticed that there was a certain bathroom in the science building, because I was a biology major. And there was always writings on the door in the stalls. And I was like, what does all of that mean? And, people were talking about, here's my phone number, call me if you want this done and if you want that done, right? And so that started to click, but it also started to mess with me a little bit, because I was like, this is really starting to come to life. And I didn't want it to. And I really started to kind of push that down and try to get past it. And I started really having really bizarre behavior. But at the same time, I was noticing that I was changing my perceptions as far as the way that I looked. And I started to do different things. I become a little bit more polished. I don't know. A little bit more funky, a little bit more.
You didn't get the sports gene, but you got the fashion gene.
I got the fashion gene. It started to kick in, and I was like, holy crap, I'm ready to bust loose. But I always had that thing in the back of my mind. And it got to the point to where it caused me to have to leave school.
Okay.
And so the stress of all of it, and I was like, I've just got to take a break. And grades slumped and all that. And while I was out of school, I had my first real gay experience with, I mean, other than fooling around with boys in the neighborhood or whatever, but I had my first real gay experience, and it really scared me. And it seemed like very creepy, and there was just the whole act of it, and it happened. And I remember after it's over, I went home and I like took 3 or 4 different baths, and I was like, I've just got to wash this all away because this isn't right. And I really tried to build up the walls and shut it all down. And while I was home, I was working at our local grocery store, and we were doing a hiring event. We had gotten bought by the Piggly Wiggly.
Big news.
Big news in Rogersville. We got the Piggly Wiggly in town. And so I was working there while I was out of college, and I ran around the corner, and out of the corner of my eye, there was this girl, and she was filling out an application. And for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, I went home that night and I said, Mom, there's the girl I'm going to marry. I saw her today.
Wow.
And she was like, really? Because I think my mom kind of in the back of her mind was like, I'm surprised. Because she kind of caught me with somebody once, and I was like, but I went home and I said, I think I've seen and found who I'm going to marry. And so I pursued her, and began dating her, and we eventually got married. So that was kind of that journey. And, and without going into a whole lot of detail about that, it didn't work.
Right.
But during the process of being married, I really come to realize this was not for me. I was not meant to be with a woman. It wasn't part of me. I struggled and I struggled and I struggled, and eventually she became pregnant, and of course I had 2 beautiful twin girls. But I struggled a lot with that.
Yeah.
And of being a father who would leave his children. And that's where I get emotional. So
what was that like? When did you actually, go into your gayness, I guess, or realize I've got to move out of this heterosexual relationship to save myself, but then I've got 2 children, which I can't imagine, all that goes with that leaving.
Yeah. So it kind of happened before. And so while I was married, I was working in a different city. And so I was driving back and forth. And one day, just out of the blue, because I'd kind of gotten to this piece to where all of the walls that I had built around myself and my gay self just kind of cracked.
Right.
And so I was left with all of this wandering, I guess you could say. And so I was driving back and forth, and it's just the weirdest thing ever. And I happened to look across on the other side of the road, and there was a car that was driving down, and I looked over, and the guy looked back at me and kind of waved, and I was like, well, that's different. And so every day for about a week or 2, I would drive, and we would meet at the same time. And he had a white car, and I would see it driving down, and we would both be on the same side of the road, and we would wave at each other. And he followed me into a gas station one morning, and then we just kind of started talking. And he invited me to come to his house for lunch. And I was like, okay, we'll try this. We'll see what it is. I've never had a guy ask me to come for lunch, but let's do it. I was a nervous wreck. I was freaking out. I was sweating. I was like, I don't know what is going to happen. And it was the first time well, it wasn't the first time, but he leaned in and gave me a kiss, and he kissed me. And it was like that kiss at that moment was the click that made me realize this is who I am.
Mm.
And so I had that discussion while I was married. And so kind of knew that I was struggling with this gayness and my gay part, my gay life, and me being gay. And so we decided we'll go to therapy to see if we can get this to work. But every therapist we went to said, I don't want to treat you unless you're going to change.
Wow, that's big.
And so they wouldn't see us. And so we didn't wind up going to therapy because I didn't want to change. It wasn't all my fault. And so then that's when later she became pregnant. And so we had to make that decision. And that was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life. And I lost so much weight. I weighed about 150 pounds. I couldn't eat. I had to have IVs because I couldn't keep liquids down. So I had to have home health come to give me IVs. And I said, I'm not going to leave until they're born. And then we have to make a decision of either I'm going to stay or I'm going to leave because I can't take this anymore. Right. And so I decided to leave. And so that was a hard decision. And I left and I packed what I could and I went and stayed with a friend. And so that kind of started a whole different part of my life. And looking back, it was so hard. I had so many people that wanted me to talk to them and be friends with them and family members, and they no longer wanted to have anything to do with me. I would go to a grocery store and they would turn and go a different direction.
Wow.
And
sad.
So that changed a lot. And my parents, they struggled with it. And not without calling me an abomination, they spoke to me a lot about in the Bible that homosexuality, and it's the biggest sin ever, and you're a total abomination. And so I carried that with me, knowing that trying to just be myself became an abomination. And it was during that darkness is the first time that I really tried to commit suicide, because I couldn't just take all this burden. It was just too much to carry, all because I was wanting to just be myself.
Right. Be your authentic self.
Be my authentic self and be me. And so after that, and, I started to kind of focus more on my children, and they were kind of my saving grace. And I always say that my children, I didn't save my children saved me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And they carried me on a different journey, so it gave me purpose. And so they kind of, through them and their unconditional love, and we got together, it was always a wonderful time. I started to carry that with me. And that started to give me a little bit more strength and a little bit more courage and to be more of myself. And I started working at a retail store in Sevierville, Tennessee. And I'll take that back. I first started working in the Louise Mandrell Theater. It's chemistry. I don't know if people... I was a chemist, and I was working a chemist, but working part-time at Louise Mandrell. And it was the very first time that I had somebody that I was there, and this girl was working in one of the concessions when I started the first day I was there, and she came out and just bluntly came up to me and she said, "You gay, ain't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "That's cool." And she just turned around, and she was the first real friend that I had there. And we just became the best of friends. Her name was Sunshine. And we just had the best time and laughed all the time. We acted silly and crazy. And I said, "You're the first person that's just came up to me and said you're gay," and said, "That's okay, and I don't care." And we actually moved in together and rented an apartment and, had that really awesome time. And it's also that time I started working at a retail company. And that period really helped me to start to come into my own. Like all of the friends that I met there and the people that I worked with, they're like, "You're gay, cool, we love it. You're no different than anybody else." And they were the
Good.
first group of people that looked at me and just saw me and saw potential and said, "You're awesome. We want you to be the best you can be. And we don't care that you're gay. We think it's amazing that you're gay." And so that really started to give me some peace.
When did you, dealing with children, I know was very difficult in coming out and everything, but when did your children and you actually start, I guess, communicating about who your authentic person was
Mm-hmm.
so that, they understood a little bit more about you? Because I know that having children falls into that whole dating and time and just everything involved.
Yeah, so it was forever. They never really had met anyone else, and I was always with them with my parents or whatever. Because when we got divorced, it was Tennessee at that time was like if since I was gay, they almost didn't let me even have them without having supervised visits. But I went to my mom's because it was just easier to get there, and we could bring the kids over there. And it was much later. It wasn't really time. Sierra was they were driving, of course they're twins. So Sierra Sierra had her permit. So, but a little bit before that, of course my ex-wife was like, "I don't want them to ever know." I'm like, okay, I don't. Eventually, it's going to have to come out at some point. And so I had to talk with her and said, I think it's time. I think it's time for me to tell them. And I'll tell you what sparked it. We were watching a television show. And I can't tell you the name of it right now. I thought I could remember it, but I can't. But in this show, it was a comedy, and the dad was coming out to his daughter. And both of my kids were sitting in the living room, and they would watch the television, and then they would turn and look at me, and they would look back at the television because he was telling his story.
Right.
And then I was like, they're starting to wonder and question. And so I told my ex-wife, I said, I really want to tell them because they're starting to become curious. So Sierra was driving, and I said, "You got to pull over. We got to talk." And so we pulled over. Of course, they were both freaking out. And of course, I just turned into a blubbering mess. And I was just bawling, and I was just crying. I was like, "I have to tell you something. And I'm too afraid to really tell you because I'm afraid you're going to stop loving me." And I said, I just really just came out and said, "I'm gay." And they looked at me and said, "You're a fantastic father. I don't care."
Oh, wow.
And so that was all I needed.
That's all you need. And I think it shows too that you raised those children right, or at least you were part of their lives raising them right, and to have openness and honesty.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful that you were able to do that, and that they were able to accept that.
Yeah, it was such a wonderful journey. And then from then on, they were like, "I'm going to tell all of my friends my dad is gay," because they're like, "Woo, we're going to have a party now." And my Sierra was a cheerleader, and all the cheerleaders were like, "Your dad is gay. Oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever heard. Oh my God, can you come sit with us? And can he come teach us how to dance?" And all. And so it was just like amazing to kind of feel all of that energy.
Yeah.
And the other really great part about that is I have been my husband now, Logan, we have been together, this will be almost 22 years.
Yeah.
21 years. No, 22. We're in 26, right? 22 years. And so we had been together for a while. And he was struggling with the fact that I wasn't open with my children.
Right.
And so right after I came out to them, and I was like, "I just want you to know that I do have someone that I've been living with. I have a partner. We've been together for quite some time. I want you to meet him." So our first meeting was we went to Dollywood.
Oh, wow. Fun.
Yeah, it was fun, and we had a good time, and then met Logan. And they were super excited because we rode roller coasters. And their memories of the roller coasters is Logan as he screams to the top of his lungs. And so they got the biggest thrill out of that. So they wanted to sit beside Logan so he could scream. And then we decided to take a family trip. So Logan and I and the girls went to Walt Disney World. And so we spent a week together, and it was a wonderful trip, and it kind of cemented our family. And so my daughters, even to this day, they don't see Logan as anything other than a stepdad.
Right.
And that's how they just view him. So that part has been a fantastic journey.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all that. Let's
You're
take a
welcome.
little bit of a break here now. I'm going to need a sip of my hot tea.
Okay.
And we'll come back and we'll talk more about how you ended up getting to Asheville and what all that's about.
And it's a fantastic story.
Perfect.